which is being held as part of the National Budget Month for next financial year. We're all aware that the budget speech for the next financial year was read on Thursday, 10th June 2021, with the theme Industrialization for Inclusive Growth, Employment and Wealth Creation. The budget month is a consultative process which continues to ensure that the interventions spelled out by government as proposed in the budget are able to address the needs and certainly the welfare and aspirations of all Ugandans. This e-conference forms part of that consultative process and has the following objectives. One, to provide a platform for discussion of the national budget priorities to enable the public gain further understanding of the budget. And two, to obtain a feedback that can be used as we start budget implementation, the interventions of which are contained in the budget for next financial year. We have so far carried out a number of activities under the National Budget Month for next financial year. And these include the launch, which was done as about a month ago. Number two, the high-level pre-budget speech discussions and dialogue. I think you saw a number of participants on the television and radio stations, all trying to distill and decompose the essential elements of the budget for understanding of the population. And certainly, on Thursday last week was the reading of the budget speech, and today is a post-budget dialogue with key stakeholders. This e-conference, ladies and gentlemen, forms the additional activity under the budget month for the budget for next financial year. It is certainly your budget as fellow citizens, and I call upon you to listen in and provide constructive feedback, and later the information will be used in implementation of the budget, and of course, certainly through enhanced monitoring and vigilance for better economic outcomes and improved service delivery. In that regard, therefore, I would like to draw your attention to the highlights of the recent economic performance before I delve into the critical interventions for growth and economic recovery for next financial year. Economic performance. Despite the impact of COVID, the Ugandan economy grew by 3.3% during the fiscal year 2020/21, compared to the revised 3% registered in the financial year 2019/2020. The size of the economy, as you all know now, as you heard from the budget speech, in nominal terms increased to Uganda shillings 148 trillion 278 billion in financial year 2020/21, up from 139 trillion 711 billion in financial year 2019/2020. As indicated in the budget speech for next financial year that was read out by the minister, we are projecting a growth rate of 4.3% next financial year. This is based on the assumptions that the negative consequences of the pandemic will subside with COVID-19 vaccinations and other critical trials that are now underway. Of course, we're in the thick of the second wave. But how will we achieve the above growth rate, and how will the budget lead to the top economic recovery? Economic growth strategy is what we are going to implement in order to achieve that. The budget for financial year 21/22 will focus on interventions which will sustain recovery from the socio-economic setbacks caused by COVID-19 and other domestic shocks, such as the locust invasion, the floods, and external shocks, such as supply disruptions caused by the lockdowns worldwide, and the trade barriers that affected exports of some commodities in our neighboring countries. In order for the economy to pick up, the budget strategy prioritizes investment in public infrastructure and supporting the private sector to increase production and productivity, plus interventions to address the health impact of COVID-19. The strategy focused on 6 broad and interlinked agenda that were highlighted in the budget speech, but sufficing to summarize so that we all are brought on board. Namely, 1, maintenance of security, peace, and good governance. 2, accelerating the pace of industrialization, research, and innovation. 3, enhancing the capacity to deal with both the demand and supply side challenges anchored on import substitution and export promotion. 4, human capital development by investing in community health, education, and water. 5, strengthening private sector by improving enterprise competitiveness with emphasis on improved physical infrastructure. And 6, championing inclusive growth through implementation of the parish model for development. What are the critical interventions for economic recovery and growth next financial year? The critical interventions for economic recovery and growth in next financial year, in line with above growth strategy, are highlighted below. 1, the most immediate priority of government is to procure vaccines and speed up vaccination to enable all sectors of people operating in the economy to open up. With weak compliance to SOPs, vaccination provides the only safe way government can lift up curfew and open up all sectors of the economy to enable the 24-hour operations to resume. The government intends to immunize at least 22 million Ugandans before fully opening up. Continued support to medium, small, and medium enterprises will be critical for spurring production of jobs. That's the second anchor on recovery of the economy. Government will therefore extend the credit relief and liquidity assistance measures, and most importantly, create an SME recovery fund with clear guidelines for eligibility and access by earmarking part of the UDB fund for SME to support SME in distress. 3, safeguarding against poverty vulnerability. The parish development model will be critical in supporting local economic development initiatives through financing of viable parish-specific enterprises that offer local solutions and provide opportunities for both self and wage employment at the parish, targeting the 39% household in subsistence economy to lift them to money economy. This will translate into an increase in both household incomes and aggregate demand. It will require certainly high-level organizations or mobilization of the people in the parishes to engage in enterprises that they best understand, assisted by the 7 pillars of the parish model. 4, harnessing the growth opportunities. Taking the FDI for oil and gas-related infrastructure development will spur investments in the economy, including FDIs themselves, both direct and indirect jobs, local enterprise growth, including forward and backward linkages to agriculture, tourism, and the development of petrochemical industries. 2, export market opportunities, as provided in the Africa Continental Free Trade Area and infrastructure development, including, among others, the linkage with DRC to provide evacuation of the badly required output from Uganda into that huge market, among others. 3, the COVID-19 silver lining for local enterprise development, which will open up avenues for further manufacture of items within, increased funding for UDB, agricultural credit facility at the Bank of Uganda, the UDC as an anchor for shareholding of government in quite a number of enterprises, to provide cheap credit and import substitution in production, therefore filling up the local demand vacuum created by COVID-19 supply disruptions. 5, quickly address competitiveness constraints by improving reliability and affordability of economic infrastructure. Number 2, balancing economic and social investments, human capital development to provide the labor market with a skilled and healthy workforce. Number 3, continue to avail affordable long-term credit for private sector investments. Let me touch on a topical issue which is becoming very, very serious in the public debate. That is the issue of public debt. Whereas public debt is projected to rise to 51.9% of GDP next financial year on account of borrowing for key infrastructure projects, especially in transport and oil and gas sectors, it is projected to decline thereafter on account of increased domestic revenue as government implements the domestic revenue mobilization strategy. And we shall be able to discuss this in detail as we go on. In conclusion, therefore, I believe the growth strategy above will facilitate economic recovery and re-engineer economic growth. The Ministry welcomes any ideas that can further improve the efficiency in planning, budgeting, spending, prioritization of interventions, generation of more domestic revenues at a low cost, as well as accountability for public resources. I therefore wish to thank all partners, the panelists, and guests that have made this event extremely possible this morning. Any additional information on the budget can be obtained from our website, www.budget.go.ug, and the budget toll-free line 0800 229 229. I thank you for God and my country.
Thank you very much, Mr. Patrick Ochailab, Acting PS, Ministry of Finance. Thank you very much for your speech. And we will be having Mr. Ochailab with us on the panel as we continue to take a deep dive into the budget. If you've just joined us, we're coming to you live from the UBOS Conference Hall here in the capital, Kampala. And we're discussing the Post-Budget Speech E-Conference 2021, trying to break it down under the theme Industrialization for Inclusive Growth, Employment, and Wealth Creation. We are live on different TV stations across the country, live on NBS TV, we are live on NTV, we are live on BBS, we are live on UBC, we are live on Smart 24, and we are also live on Salt TV, as well as URA TV. We would love you to be part of the conversation on Twitter. We'll be able to get your views, and on Facebook, and we will put these very serious concerns and issues and contributions to our panel. Right now we're going into a discussion for our first panel, and I want to invite Mr. Patrick Ochailab, who is the Acting PS, to please take your seat, sir. We will be breaking it down how you are going to help us and the economy to recover. You're sitting in a very big chair, sir, and you and I have interfaced before on some of these issues. So I'm really happy that you are here, and we are going to help break down this budget to the tiniest core. I want to invite Mr. Michael Atingi Ego, who is the Deputy Governor for Bank of Uganda, to please come and take your seat. And Bank of Uganda was very, very instrumental in stabilizing the economy while we were going through that wave during the COVID-19 pandemic, at the thick of it. We will look at how Uganda's financial and monetary policies helped the economy to recover, or are still helping the economy to recover. We want also to welcome the Executive Director of CSBAG, Mr. Julius Mukunda, to also come in. Julius and CSBAG have really been instrumental in the budgeting process, and they've given their honest views and opinions on the budget for every financial year. And they can be the independent eye that can actually put some context to many of the issues that we're going to raise today. Offshore, we will be joined by the Executive Director of the National Planning Authority, Mr. Muvawala, who will be joining us online. I hope we have him already. We will be certainly engaging him on the strategies that are supposed to be implemented to help the economy recover, but most importantly, to fit into the national development plan. So allow me take my seat first of all, and then we can go ahead. Okay, gentlemen, thank you once again for coming this morning. You'll allow me, first of all, give another opportunity to the PS, first of all, to set the agenda. You know, this budget is more program-based rather than sector-based. I thought that we could start on that note, because there are very many people who previously were used of, you know, the Minister of Finance saying that we have allocated this chunk to this ministry. We have allocated this chunk to this ministry. But it's more of program-based. And you should, this morning I was talking to one of the journalists. I told him, what do you think about the program-based budget as compared to the sector-based budget? And there were mixed reactions there. But first of all, I want you to help us understand. Let's get the bare minimum right. Why did the Ministry of Finance and government at large decide to go with a program-based budget as opposed to the sector-based budget?
Thank you very much, Moderator, for that very clear question. The sector-based or ministry-based allocations in the past have been applied over the years for determining the resources that go to sectors for implementation of government programs. But over the years, it has been realized that the attainment of the desired transformative aspects of the economy remained reasonably elusive, more especially when you look at the poverty numbers and also the people who are living in subsistence economy. We clearly see that despite this country being predominantly having a good comparative advantage in agriculture, there have been a number of interventions in the sector under the sector-wide approach. For example, the seed distribution under OWC was about 500 billion shillings per month. The money was going to narrow for research. Research on what? The seeds. The seeds for what? Both animals and plants. And how were the seeds being evacuated? There was no clear linkage there. The research was in Greek. Quite a number of things were happening there, and resources were going there in excess of about 100 billion per annum. And you find that Greek was researching on high-level production of animals and also production of other agriculture-related issues that we are researching on. All these were producing scientific information, high-quality seeds, high-quality breeds of animals, but somehow the linkage within the sector to deliver on transformation of the livelihood at the household level of high-yielding seeds, high-yielding animals was difficult to come by because they were operating, each of them in silos, delivering standalone mandates and so on and so forth without a correlation that would otherwise bring the totality of the development that's required. That's a transformative approach to the livelihood at a household level. On realization of that, and as NDP 3 was being formulated, it was then agreed that, no, let's put together all these sectors which are having a common objective of transforming, say, the lives of people under the agro-industrialization anchor, improving productivity and agro-industrialization. That then links up the various players in the sectors to truly work together, not in silos, and create the change that we want in the program to deliver on the result that we want at the end of NDP 3. For example, the change from this silo mentality of OWC operating discipline seedlings and the others which I mentioned as example, operating in silos, is expected then under the parish model to take the whole of government operation at a parish where the parish people are organized on the best item that they can produce together at a household level, evacuate that item into the next level of agro-processing. You are now linking agriculture output to industry at the next level. It may be a primary production or processing first at the first level, things like milling maize, beyond maize to maize flour, and you get the off-takers, I mean the items of the chaff that comes out of maize, which can then be linked with maybe producing animal and chicken feed instead of carrying maize individually to respective markets or having people drive all the way from neighboring countries or even within Uganda to buy the whole of gardens before you harvest. And then you don't get even a good price at that point in time. So organization under a program approach to make under the parish model approach will make the production, first of all, consistent with what has been guided in an organized manner. It will make it easy for the extension work to be delivered at a parish level for those people to produce a homogeneous item for a common market. It will improve collective bargaining under the concept of cooperatives. Those of you who grew under cooperatives know the power of cooperatives for collective bargaining. It will also link that output with now our rural electrification program, where the rural growth centers are going to be serviced, or if they're not yet connected, they're going to be connected to electricity for them to do the initial primary processing of those products.
Yeah.
And so on and so forth.
Okay.
So a program approach, therefore, is a holistic way in which we want the government to operate, move away from the silo mentality, and deliver on a common program for transformation of society. And it's measurable, it's monitorable, and we can be able to follow through with clear targets, because the NP has gone further to develop the program indicators.
Okay. We'll try to get to the parish model in just a bit. Michael, what do you think about this type of budgeting from your view, program-based budgeting as opposed to sector-based budgeting? Your thoughts on the budgeting process?
Thank you very much. Well, I'm not a fiscal economist. I have something to say. Certainly, I think the idea of operating in silos is not very helpful, because you find that you might be addressing an issue in one sector and you get some success in that sector. But to the extent that there are linkages in the economy, if you've not addressed a constraint that explains the delivery of the output from that sector, you could actually end up not realizing your result. Let me give you a very basic example. Suppose the financial institutions extend credit for the growing of maize. You recall, those of you who are old enough, there was what they call the Rural Farmer Scheme that was undertaken by UCB. These guys gave a lot of money, and there was a bumper harvest of maize, but they had nowhere to market it. So what happened? These guys ended up with maize in their granaries. The UCB credit officers went to demand for the loan. They said, look, we can't market. If you want, take the maize, right? A more recent case is we had good weather last year. We harvested a good amount of maize, but we can't export the maize to Kenya because of the standards are not being met. So how do you ensure there is coordination in delivering of some objectives? So I think a program-based approach, in my view, tries to identify where all the weaknesses are and address those things so that from point A to Z, you have a smooth flow in delivering your objectives. So I think I agree with the PS in the adoption of a program rather than sector-based allocation.
Okay, great. Julius, issues around accountability under such an approach, but let me just get your thoughts, overall thoughts around the programs-based budgeting rather than the sector-based budgeting.
Yes, I think, thanks, Tom. I think, like the governor said, budgeting in isolation really is wastage of resources. One of the things we realize, of course, is that you'll find that a ministry, for example, is budgeting for, these free zone, these industrial parks. Aguric is doing one, KCC wants to do one, Minister of Energy, then you have Uganda Investment Authority, and you are wondering, are we in different countries? So it really reduces on duplication, and I think for me that's one thing I like about it. It must reduce, it should reduce on duplication. Is it doing it now? We don't know yet, but it must reduce duplication so that by the time you're going to implement an activity, you need to understand where that activity fits in a government program, and that definitely can help us. So in terms of accountability for me is I look at the way in terms of how we are going to reduce on duplication of resources. Thank you.
All right, sounds good. It looks like it has got a nod from all of us, from the people here. The people have been really questioning about accountability and how will we be able to follow the money and also to, follow the progress of works. But Patrick Ochailab told me that there have been different deliverables that have been set to ensure that this program works. All right, let's get direct to the program, the budget for this financial, which is under the theme of industrialization for inclusive growth, employment, and wealth creation. And just hearing from your speech, you're quite optimistic, especially for the economy that has really been, in my view, struggling. And I know that the Minister of Finance has done whatever it can to help the economy recover. But let's look back a little bit from our history, where we're from, and that maybe helps us to understand where we are going. The COVID-19 pandemic really was, it really hit us hard. The foreign direct investment significantly dropped. The service sector literally collapsed. The retail, wholesalers, people were into the accommodation, food business, everything went to its lowest. They sacked people off their job. In fact, according to the Ministry of Finance, they say about only 10% in SMEs were able to reopen until October 2020, when 93% of them were asked to come back to work. So we come from a background of an economy that has really been struggling. The tourism sector badly hit. The transport sector at that time was badly hit. And the second wave is coming. So this is why it's important for us to look at where we were from and where we're going. And then you're focusing on industrialization. So let me maybe perhaps start with Bank of Uganda here. We went through a very rough time, and BOU really played a significant role. How did you manage to stabilize the economy? And what lessons do we learn moving forward as the second wave approaches and as we're going really deep into the financial year? And what is going to be the role of the central bank in stabilizing the economy? Michael.
Thank you so much.
Maybe you can switch on your mic, sir.
Again, no, I'm not used to these things. So. Yeah, thank you so much. I think at the onset of the pandemic, we were very much concerned about how do we save lives. And as a result, we went into a lockdown. So there were some unintended consequences of this lockdown. The lockdown, as a result of the movement, the restrictions in the movement and the disruption of the supply chains, resulted into weakened economic activity. And that weakened economic activity had implications, one, for the price stability objective, and also for the financial sector stability. So the question then was, how do we resuscitate growth in this environment? How do we ensure that we continue having financial sector stability, notwithstanding the lockdown? So as a result, the central bank put in place some measures to deal with the recovery of or to maintain some activity in the economy while ensuring that the financial sector remains stable. So the most fundamental of this was the lowering of the central bank rate to 7%. This has been the lowest ever. The issue was the aim was to have the financial institutions access liquidity at the cheapest level possible, with the hope that this will translate into lower interest rates and also maybe encourage borrowers to borrow more and rekindle economic activity. And the other one was liquidity support to supervised financial institutions. A number of windows were opened to help commercial banks or supervised financial institutions access credit from the central bank. And also a number of credit relief measures were put in place to support the overall recovery of the economy by availing liquidity to the system. So basically there were two aspects, the pricing and the quantity of liquidity, which were all aimed at generating or rekindling growth. So if you ask me how has been the performance of this, I think overall there has been recovery, but it's uneven, and going forward it is uncertain because it's dependent on the extent to which economic recovery is going to go forward. If, as we project the recovery in the medium term, then we think that these measures are also going to bear fruit. We are yet to understand what is the impact of this partial lockdown that has been put in place. And is it going to be over after 42 days? Or are we going to extend it? There's all this uncertainty, and that feeds in to what happens to the economic recovery. But let me briefly go to the outcome of this. When you look at inflation, inflation has been benign. It's been low for a number of reasons. The capacity of people to buy, to purchase, has been limited. Even if you got money today, since you do not know what tomorrow is going to bring, you are likely to keep it in your pockets or in your bank account, waiting for that rainy day. So your spending habits are kind of like constrained. So aggregate demand has been weakened, all right? And then also there is a supply side, the supply chain disruptions, okay, because of the restrictions, the movement of transport. Just look at this inter-district movement that has been put in place. For you now to move, I don't know, a bow, a saw from Wakiso to my home district in Soroti, I mean, it is really constraining, all right? So all those supply chain disruptions also affected it. Now, to build on the aspect of weakened demand, you find that UBOS will tell you that the producer price index, inflation has gone up, but the consumer price index inflation has not risen as much. Because of the supply side disruptions, your producer prices have gone up, but because of the weakened demand, people are not purchasing these goods whose prices have gone up, so that has constrained the ability. Then finally, on the impact of commercial banks, at the beginning of the lockdown, on a monthly basis, banks were asking for 600 billion shillings of restructuring. This is now down. That was in March 2020. In March 2021, the applications for restructuring are only 60 billion. That's a reduction of 90%. And that shows you that the economy has kind of like begun to recover, and then so the capacity to repay the loans has improved, and then also the capacity of the supervised financial institutions to rehabilitate the loans has improved. Now, who are these guys who are still asking for restructuring? These are the sectors that have been badly hit by COVID-19 and whose recovery is prolonged. It's mainly education, tourism, and other hospitality industries. So that's what I'm thinking, that maybe we need to think of a program. How do we target these sectors, recovery of these sectors? Because it is affecting the economy in terms of education, in terms of tourism and what have you. So I don't know, the PFST, you might have to think of some fiscal measures.
And listen, Michael, I agree with you entirely. Whereas, and this is where it's all coming from, the service sector, for example, contributed 44% to our GDP, service sector itself, at least according to that. And of course, it was followed by industrialization at 26% and agriculture at 23%. So from the figures, you're looking at the service sector, and it employs so many people. And the service sector too includes the very people you'll be talking about, the education sector, that in my view was employing, according to the statistics from UBOS, over 20 million Ugandans employed by the education sector. So I think you're right to think that the Ministry of Finance needs also to factor them in. And how do we help the service sector get back into business, even amidst this pandemic? I know we're going to talk about industrialization, but I want us to be alive to the fact that The service sector contributes greatly to the GDP, employs so many people, and the more reason for us to focus on them. What are you going to do this financial year to help the person in Chikubo? And I think this is what the budget process is about, to help someone in Chikubo who has been doing shopping, to help someone who no longer opens their schools because of COVID-19, and remember how they are badly hit. Let's address those people, and then we can slide into the 26% for industrialization, Patrick.
Certainly, moderator, that's a tough call, but I think in order to have those sectors at least sustain the little momentum which had developed when the partial lockdown was being lifted, the answer lies in, I think, in my opinion, 3 areas. Area number 1, with respect to education and maybe tourism and these other service sectors, is unfortunately going to hit on the expenditure side again with respect to what we ought to do. Namely, within these 42 days, it is very important that the health sector, together with the education sector, implement a number of measures that may mitigate a continued lockdown after the 42 days. What are these kind of measures? For example, it is necessary that while vaccination of all teachers must be done before the 42 days, if the vaccine becomes available, because I'm told also that there may be a constraint there. But I think if the vaccine becomes available, it's very important to start vaccination of the teachers so that at least by the time we reach the 42 days, every person who is going to be in contact with the pupils becomes vaccinated. Number 2, it will also be very important to address the issue which I saw from the private school operators, which was a proposal that they need to be assisted to have isolation facilities in their schools, or at least group schools around a radius of, say, 5 to 10 kilometers, where if a pupil or a student is identified to be having this virus, is isolated from the rest, that's after 42 days, and put in that facility. And that facility must be linked with the referral health system, so that the presence of sick students or teachers in schools is quickly linked up with evacuation. As I said, unfortunately, that requires a fiscal expansion to have facilities grouped around areas of a radius of, say, 10 kilometers. I'm not a public health expert, but I think this is the kind of thinking that ought to be going on if we are to mitigate further damage by further extensions of this. The third issue, which also requires another fiscal expansion, is certainly to have the health workers who are competent enough to handle the isolated cases in those areas where the isolated people are, give the basic treatments and so on and so forth, and also be able then to relay them to the next level of the medical care. The third area, which I think all of us are now familiar with, oxygen is running out everywhere. Oxygen is running out everywhere. So I think the expansion of the capacity to produce oxygen to supply those areas and hospitals, the areas that I mentioned about, for quick attention of the qualified medical personnel to administer it, because I had a program this morning, doctors are saying, please don't buy a cylinder of oxygen and go and pump yourself in the house. So it's necessary to have, as we expand the number of medical people to attend to those who are falling sick, it's also necessary to expand the requirement for the facilities. Together with oxygen then is the therapy that we are talking about. What is it that we're using now to keep 98%? Not everybody who gets COVID dies. So to keep 98% alive, what is it that we are doing? Of course, SOPs is a LCM. SOPs must be there. That will be the starting point. But those SOPs must also be practiced in all schools. And that's what I said is another expansion of the fiscal side. To have education sector open up, to have tourism sector. What I'm talking about in education can also be extended to tourism as well. But of course, tourism can also be better controlled by other measures at the airports or point of entry and exit, and also in the tourist facilities themselves by enhancing SOPs and having this access to these medications, oxygen, etc., etc.
Whereas I hear you loud and clear, I think that the Minister of Finance and indeed government is going to face a very, very tough time, because especially this financial year. I read in the newspapers recently that there were over 150 schools that were being, auctioned. The owners are giving them out because they can no longer afford the loans. I think that's what Michael was trying to say, that some people were saying, can we refer the loans? The banks themselves are also under pressure to meet their targets. There's a lot of pressure on businesses, and we'll talk about the SMEs. And this is where I want to bring you in, Julius. It's going to be a very delicate one, especially this financial year, with the service sector. I thought we could do a round on the service sector. With the service sector, which is employing many people, which is largely affected, and they're very people who actually pay the taxes. I wanted you to weigh in on that delicate balance, and what do you think that this budget is going to do to help address the challenges in the service sector? Because, to be honest, it really employs so many people and it contributes largely to the GDP.
Thanks, Solomon. I'll take on to where the governor has almost stopped. I think the interventions of Bank of Uganda have almost reached their limit. Probably, I don't know if they have more space to do that. Maybe that's the other one. So the 60 billion that now is there for this service sector, what should we do? And I think for me that's a very good starting point. One of the things I think needs to be done, of course, is can we provide relief to these particular sectors? And it goes to my point of, for any policy that we are developing, it must be specific to target particular areas or sectors that are heavily being affected by COVID. So it's not only education, but probably it's also these other small and medium enterprises. The only challenge that is there is how do you do that? Which instrument can you do to ensure that it's not abused? In some countries, you go and buy off these sectors. Hopefully, when they recover, they can be able to pay back and you recover your money. But in an area where you find the school's ownership, you even don't know who owns it, it does not keep the books of account, it is not contributing to URA in terms of tax returns, it becomes a bit of a challenge in this country. It's not only that, but probably others. So what should we do? I think it's quite very important that in this country, we need to have registration of these businesses so that we can be able to track them properly. So that in terms of crises like this, if you're able to provide this kind of relief, there is the way that you would track this relief and it will be able to bring it back. So that's point number one. Point number two for me is on the issue of, in terms of what we need also to do is, I know the pressures in URA. The revenues are not coming up. We are hitting very hard on them that we are borrowing so much. And now we are telling them, please expand. We need some more money. So probably if you go to the governor, can you print some more notes? The governor will say, please, I can't print more notes. It can't be an option. But there is an option that can happen. And the option is in terms of looking at the efficiency levels within what we do. To the extent that I was really very happy to listen to the budget speech to say they're actually going to save 800 billion out of consumptive expenditures to cut them down. I was like, okay, this is a very good measure. It's very important that we become frugal in this particular area. Where should we spend money and know that we're going to get some returns, and where should we not and postpone those particular expenditures? That is very important, so that we can have some small monies to help us deal with these coming problems. Because otherwise, we are really between a hard rock and a stone in terms of what we can do. The only thing is to save in terms of consumptive expenditures. And that goes on with even our communities. If you're asking for a new district, if you're asking for a new city, if you're asking for a new member of parliament, if you want to have a new, just know that those resources that you're asking, that those things you're asking for need resources. So if we can stop those demands. Lastly, is the whole thing about, for me, is Closing leakages within our system, it's quite very important. Let us ensure that what we spend, we can be able to account for it. It is very important that we spend on the right things and the right people actually benefit from these amounts of money. So if we are going to say we are supporting education institutions, thank you very much. Let us have a list on the notes board so that we all know which institutions are being supported. But if that list comes out and you find that actually half of them are not education institutions, then the idea of supporting education institutions so that they can be able to recover is gone. And the same thing with everything is that we need transparency and accountability, even when we are in this particular crisis, because we are being told do everything but keep the receipts. But if at the end of the day we have no receipts to show, then I can tell you that the impact of COVID is going to be even much worse than what we're expecting at this particular moment. I thank you.
I think Julius raises very serious points here, and Julius, we will hint on that just shortly. But let's cross over and talk to Dr. Joseph Muvawala, who is the Executive Director of the National Planning Authority. We've had conversations around planning for this country and budgeting differently. We have the National Development Plan 3, which I know is anchored on industrialization and the resource allocations in the budget. So I want to see what he thinks about it. Dr. Joseph, thanks for joining us this morning. Does this budget fit very well? Does it pass the test of the National Development Plan? Are we putting money? You know, I was once with Joseph one day, I think one of the readings of the national budget, and then he gave me a scenario of a family. You have plans, I am going to do A, B, C, D, E, but when the money comes, you actually spend it elsewhere, and then you want to, at the end of the year, see how far have you gone with the implementation of your plan at family level. And so he helped me understand that. Joseph, come in. Do you think that this time around, the budgeting process has tried to fit into the industrialization agenda as detailed in the ministerial policy statement, the financial statement for this year's budget? Dr. Joseph.
Thank you very much. One of them, this is critical, whether our budget has been allocated to the areas we think are critical, mainly industry. Now, the answer is yes and no. We are operating in very unusual conditions right now. I do not expect the budget this year to be able, we have problems that we're dealing with. I can tell you that while we had a
Doc, do you want me to pick it up?
And I'm using the need to be fair to our colleagues. We have a discretion. Yeah, we have a discretion problem. Do we have the space that we need to be able to spend on? We have made some expenditures fine, but it has not covered the most important parts of our industrialization agenda. Dr. Ting has alluded to the issue of maize. We produced maize. We are going to continue producing maize, but we have a standard problem, and we have not allocated money to standards. It means we will continue producing maize and not be able to export. Why? Our budget, we have a wage, which is almost bloated. So when we get resources, the first call on our resources is wage. The second call on our resources is security. So what do you remain with? So the issue right now that we need to do within the budgets of the different sectors is to prioritize. We must prioritize. Otherwise, I don't think we have done justice. Not because we don't want, but because the situation in which we find ourselves is very, very complicated. Internet, I don't know whether you get me loud and clear.
Yeah, we've missed some bits, but we have got the core of it. And let me put that exactly to Ochailab here.
Yeah.
And you've just heard it from the man who plans for this country. He really takes time, and I need to admit that Dr. Joseph Muvala is a very brilliant man, one of the Uganda's best brains, at least in my view, that I've interfaced with. He sits down with his team, plans for this country, and yet your allocations are elsewhere. So you're spending a lot, about 5.5 trillion shillings into wages and salaries, according to this budget. You have the security again taking the lion's share. And he's complaining, he's saying, guys, we are thinking about constructing 23 industrial parks as detailed in the National Development Plan. We are thinking big into industrialization, and yet you're allocating money elsewhere. You are literally, disheartening the man himself. You've heard him, Ochailab. Do you want to comment on this? Are we getting our priorities right in this case, as Dr.
Yes.
Muvala was saying?
Yes, we are getting our priorities right, except the resource envelope is very limited. And
I've heard that before, Ochailab.
I think Doctor knows very well where we are coming from. I think with respect to the program allocations, I heard him talking about sectors again, which was difficult for me to comprehend. I thought we had moved away from sectors to programs. And the programs which are getting more money is actually agro-industrialization. And you may say that let's look at the components, the essential components of each of those programs and see where the money is going under each of those programs. And I think you clearly see that when we develop this together, after getting the lining of programs, I think maybe Director Budget later on will be able to show you the allocations per program. And you clearly see that the program number 1, which is about 7.7 trillion, is going to the right choice of where we want the industrialization agenda and the thematic areas of the budget for next financial year to go. The decomposition into wage and non-wage and development can also be disaggregated, and we can clearly see that the wage component is going up. It's not actually going to wages of this administrative cadre, no. It's going to wages of scientists. The increase in nurses that I was talking about, I was not talking from the blue. I knew there is a need for us to increase the wage bill for the medical workers, and I think part of the larger part of resources for next financial year in the health sector is mark my word, part of that is going to increase the medical workers and also scientists in research for us to link the necessary part of our health care with the necessary delivery under the program. So
let's also admit that whereas there are key priority sectors, we have an increased administrative wage bill. I mean, looking at our parliament, our executive, I think, yes, and I say thank you for looking into the issue of medical workers, but the significant chunk of the money is going into public administration and wages, rather than putting it into the core priority area, which is industrialization. And that's what Joseph was trying to say.
Yes, there's money going to administration, public administration, but that's the cost you have to pay for the political economy arguments. I didn't expand Parliament. Parliament expanded. So you must provide for wage. You can't wish it away. So
you say I don't have money for you. And
no.
Because
but it's not to
you
say...
plan for this country, Ochailab.
Yes,
so you cannot just say that Parliament is expanding and I have to look for money to pay salaries. You say I don't have those resources, period.
I said so also. Now,
thank you.
Now, let's come back to the issue. I think the ultimate objective is really that we must be able to see that money has gone into the areas that we think are going to deliver. It's not going to be an overnight affair. We are going to continuously emphasize the incremental allocations in the subsequent financial years. We're not going to deliver NDP in 1 year. No. We're going to deliver it in a 5-year period. But have we started the journey? Yes. In which programs? Those programs that I think we shall be able to get the detail about in order for us to start the journey and continue measuring. And what we can do is not control the past. We cannot. It is to control the future. And I agree with Julius when he says we should stop certain public administration expenses expanding. With respect to debt, I think we have no choice, because when revenue collapsed, we had to borrow more in order to sustain the activities in the economy. So I think these are the kind of trade-offs you have to make when you're allocating resources to various competing demands.
Patrick, we'll talk about debt in our last round, and I thought that we could talk a little bit more about the industrialization bit. And from the theme of this budget, it looks like you're going to be focusing on the private sector to support the industrialization and also to support foreign direct investments. And the government has a plan of setting up 23 industrial parks. The president is always launching industrial industries and factories in different industrial parks. Michael, let me draw you into this conversation as BOU, but also as an observer on what's happening in this country. So the plan that government is looking at is to provide cheap capital to people who are going to be investing in industrialization. Patrick made that in his opening remarks. And let me just make it very clear in this budget. Part of the allocations that government is going to do, government is going to give the Uganda Development Bank a further 103 billion in this financial year, 2021-2022. And that's in addition to the already recapitalization that they were given. That's about 555 billion shillings, which was disbursed in the previous financial year. And that is so much to help small and medium enterprises affected by COVID-19 and other industries. They're also looking at, putting money in the microfinance support center to help the SMEs. But I also know that the agriculture credit facility under the Bank of Uganda is one that government will be injecting money. Do you think that these figures can go beyond text and become alive and can be used up by the people who need this money? And I'm not being pessimistic, and Ochelap is laughing at me, but I'm just trying to say, will manufacturers and people in the industrialization sector have an opportunity of getting this money? And I did an investigation into this, you know that, so I know exactly where this is. So do you want to lay Ugandans' fears of Ugandans and to the manufacturers out there who are looking for cheap capital, that this very money will actually be accessed to help them recover and help the economy to bounce back? Michael.
Thank you so much. I think the size, the demand for resources that is needed for recovery is quite enormous. And what the budget has provided may not fully meet it, all right? Like the PS has mentioned, the resources are very scarce. So this is trying to show something that we're doing something, but in terms of the meeting the real need, I don't think it's the case. So if you were to ask me, what needs to be fundamentally done to address the issue of capital, now, you see, there are two issues here. There's working capital, and then there's the real creation of capital. Those two need different types of financing. What is happening in our economy today? Commercial banks that operate at the short end of the market, they mobilize deposits 1-2 years maximum, and maybe now they got something. You find these guys who own schools going to a commercial bank to borrow a loan for 10 years. Now, a commercial bank, because its liabilities at the short end of the market, is trying to create long-term assets. A 10-year loan to a guy who's constructing a school. So how do they close that maturity mismatch? They have to go to the interbank, do this and this, and that's very expensive. So we need to address the issue of long-term capital mobilization. And that's why I go back to the reforms in the National Social Security Fund are very, very critical in this. Look at the liability structure of NSSF. It's long-term. But where are they investing their money? They're buying treasury bills, bonds, they're constructing buildings. Now, if you ask me what is the rate of return on this compared to if this money were to be invested in capital projects, if this, if we had these pension funds going into long-term investments beyond what they're currently doing, I think the rate of return would be very high, and therefore, the needs that we're talking about that are not being addressed by the budget could maybe be partly covered. Okay? And then the other thing that we have to look at is Bank of Uganda has extended the yield curve. We now have 20 years, thanks to the Treasury for recently issuing a 20-year bond. So we have extended the yield curve to 20 years. So now we have 2, 3, 5, 10, 15, and I think 20. Now, what does this do? I think this yield curve is providing a benchmark for private sector to begin pricing their own resource mobilization. So the issue is, why can't they do it? It goes back to the issues that Julius mentioned. Even our private sector, registration, tax payment, by the time you go to things, you have to come clean, right? So you cannot...
And Michael, that is one of the biggest challenges with many of our businesses here, coming clean. Yes.
Right. So we are not able to tap into all the things. So addressing the things that becomes important. So now let's look at the working capital, for example. We are complaining of the high interest rates. Yes, the interest rates are very high. But why are they high? My friend, Mr. Chailap, in the year ending 30th June, is borrowing 6.8 trillion shillings from this small market here. Do you know what 6.8 trillion shillings is?
He's competing with the private sector.
Exactly. So pricing them out...
Shame on you, Mr. Chair.
Pricing them
You're going to get all this money from the domestic market, and the private sector has to compete with government. Michael, please go ahead.
Pricing them out in terms of price and also quantity. But I don't blame him entirely, because the performance of the Uganda Revenue Authority has been below par as a result of the COVID-19. So what kind of counter-cyclical policy measure do you undertake? Then you need to increase your domestic borrowing. After all, commercial banks also were not lending to the private sector because they were risk averse, that if I give you credit, your school is closed, how are you going to repay it? So they were washed with liquidity. They didn't know what to do. So government provided an avenue for them. So what is important is, what does the PSSU do with that money that they're borrowing? Are they going to rekindle growth from that money? So that is the critical issue. And I think Mr. Chailab should address it, that the money he borrowed, what did he use it for? I think that's what he should answer. Then we can go ahead.
No, I agree with you, Mr. Chailab. That will come in after Julius. You get this money. Where do you put it? Yeah. I thought you would put it back into the private sector to help it recover. But you'll be answering that shortly. Julius, your thoughts on that issue? Access to cheap credit for the private sector in a long term so that it can, help in the manufacturing and production.
Yes, I think he just put it right today. The whole thing around the maturity mismatch. Yes, we have those manufacturers who want 10-year, 20-year, loan period. We also have the grain millers who probably want 2 to 3 year loan period. I think it goes back to my first point, to have targeted policy actions. If we know we are going to do industrialization, we need long-term capital. Is it there? And that's why I go back to Chailab. Is he providing it? Is UDB ready to provide that? But also I want to see my grain millers get something to be able to start and produce this particular, add value to maize. Is he providing that from the money he's picking from the domestic market? So two things. One is, in my opinion, UDB is not meant for grain millers. My understanding, UDB is for commercial people, big factories, these big companies.
Julius, Ochailap is saying he's giving them...
Yes, so...
Ochailap is saying he's giving them 103 billion shillings for this financial year for small and medium enterprises.
Yes.
The next...
I'm then yet to see those guidelines to say now, UDB, please stop, give this amount to small scale and this amount to the big boys and guys in the market. What I would have loved most to see is to replicate the ACF, for example, which is for commercial farmers, to also do for small scale and medium, commercial farmers. Or we ensure that our microfinance support center or our Posta Uganda, we also augment them with such a kind of capital so that they can be able to target the small and medium enterprises. Because for me, the big boys and girls in the market really, they don't have a big problem with credit. Some of them can actually even get it externally. Beyond here, they have the capacity because they have clean books. But if we go to our small and medium enterprises, you find that it is very strenuous really for them to access even 2-3 million. Because they will ask for you a TIN number, your registration, they ask for forms to be certified, a number of things which actually are not even privy about. So it's quite very important that as we try to help, we should look at means of how they can access this money, but by the way, without defaulting, that's the other part. Without defaulting, because this money is not free of charge. If you take it, you should be in a position to bring it back. So for me, the market, that's how I want to see it. Targeted options for everybody who is in the market. Let it be small, let it be medium, or let it be large. Thank you.
I think that you raise a very critical issue, and I know that government injected some money in the Microfinance Support Center for the Myoga program to help the small and medium enterprises. And you're nodding in denial or in acceptance, Julius? All right, but we're still talking about access to cheap credit. Mr. Chaila, Michael asked a very interesting question. So you get all this money from the domestic market. Where do you put it?
Thank you very much. I think that's a very good question. But I think before I answer the question where the money has gone, I want to agree with Michael that there is a reform on the, not NSSF alone, because NSSF is not the retirement benefit sector, it's not the pension sector as a whole, but it's the largest player in the pension sector. The pension reform generally started with the creation of a regulator, but when it went to the next stage where we are supposed to reform the entire pension sector to determine the rules of the game of the players, both government and the players in the pension sector, I think that was a bill which was withdrawn later on because there was a mix-up between the debate on NSSF amendment to the NSSF Act, where some people argued that by amending the NSSF Act and having UBRA, then we are done with the reforms. Far from it. So I agree with the governor that I think we need to start the aspect of bring back that bill live into the public domain. We debate it in order to bring an environment of the retirement benefits reforms that truly mobilize monies which are of a long-term nature in NSSF and other retirement benefit schemes into a pool of resources that may become available in order to buy down the interest rates in this country instead of trading in the short term or short end of the investments. That is a very, very important thing that we should do. Fast track the agenda in reforming the pension sector so that we liberate this money for long-term capital investment. That's a solution for mobilizing money domestically for long-term capital. Now, the second point I want to make is with respect to what both mentioned, that when you mobilize this money, or when you put this money to UDB, Microfinance Support Center, Agricultural Credit Facility, ETC, UDC is supposed to be a shareholding side. Who is coming to pick this money? How organized are these people who are supposed to pick this money? There is also a solution for us there that we need to think about organizing the informal sector. There's a large informal sector in this economy that wants credit, but not organized in a manner that will make them viable for credit lending institutions, for them to pick the money from them. So we owe a duty also collectively for us to organize, encourage the traders to keep books of accounts, encourage the business community, small, to keep books of accounts, encourage them to form together, to form stronger institutions to be able to borrow. You can imagine All bodabodas, for example, may want credit. They are small scale and micro, but where can they go individually to borrow in order to buy more capital, which is a boda or something like that? So the whole equation about organizing businesses from informality to formality is very critical. And partly that's why the Myoga will do very well. I mean, not the Myoga, the parish model will do very well if we start organizing right from the grassroots, from production function coming upwards and supplying the industry in a consistent manner. Now, let me go to the issue, where does this money go? Of the 6 trillion that I borrowed this year, 2.6 trillion went to replace the revenue which I thought I was going to collect for financing the things which I budgeted for, but did not come as a result of the disruption, 2.6. Then there are other COVID-induced expenditures, up to about 1.6 trillion of imports of things which we had not budgeted for in the budget, that we had to import as a result of either import or buy as a result of COVID. For example, we also had to buy posho and beans. We are not budgeted for posho and beans for the people who became vulnerable the following day the lockdown was instituted. That's to stabilize the basic stabilization that's necessary in the economy. We had to give money for a Myoga, which are not in the budget, about 400 and something billion. All these details are there. Out of that money, we also had to give money to a number of other areas that were in import especially of the PPEs. Remember the story about PPEs before we started manufacturing locally? You know how much went there. It's quite a hefty amount of money. And then, of course, we had to undergo some recruitments also in order to address the shortfalls, which became glaring. And I think this COVID thing is the right time for us to really do something better in our health service delivery.
I hear you, and Michael was looking at you with this eye of like, did he invest any of the money into the private sector though? But
yes, private sector got it indirectly from the resources that went to Myoga. I hope that money reached those people. So a limited extent of about 400 billion. Private sector got that money from there. And there are quite a number of, we also had to pay up to about 600 billion on the outstanding areas. Of course, we have consumer services, so we have to strengthen them. So I can give a detail, but I think this money went for a good cause. And
I hope it did, because I know that you sanctioned an audit into where that money is, and you have a report on your table that shows the detailed inconsistencies in the accountability for the different sectors that you gave this money. And I hope you act on that report, because I know it's on your table.
We shall.
And if you don't, I will act also on it. So
you tell me to go away. I'll happily go.
All right. Okay, let's talk about, let me bring in the National Planning Executive Director. Dr. Joseph, you've really been hearing it closely from the gentleman here. I wanted to draw your attention to NDP3, which is really your masterpiece, and it's a masterclass, I should add. But do you think that this budget is going to support the NDP in terms of attracting foreign direct investments in any way? Have you also, as the National Planning Authority, been supported to help this plan come to life? Dr. Joseph.
Thank you very much. First and foremost, the budget strategy is spot on. The budget is attempting as much as possible to support the plan. Have we been supported? Yes. Have we participated in this budget? Yes. Do we have a problem? Yes, we have a problem. As a team of people who are budgeting for this country, we are frustrated. I know, I am particularly. There are things we want to spend money on, but we don't have the discretion. We don't have the money. For me, that's the issue. We should now be discussing how much discretion do we have as budget people in this country to affect change in this country, when there are certain fixed items that we cannot touch. So for that, I can tell you, yes, we are supported, but I want us to take this analysis a level lower and go to the people that are receiving this money, whatever budget remains, is it actually improving? I could see my brother in difficulty telling you what the 6.8 trillion did. That is the situation we are in. It's an emergency situation. We borrowed money from the commercial market. We did not use most of it for investment because of the issues that are, and we are going to pay it back. And when you look at our payment receipts, they're increasing every day. So I think we should stop this song of whether the budget is going to increase or not, and ensure that the spending units that are getting this money are using it precisely for the priorities. I'll give you an example. Ministry of Industry and Trade, whatever resources they have, we should insist they spend it on doing the silos and dealing with the standards. Now is the time for us to go for budget efficiency at the spending unit, because we know there are areas, whether we like it or not, we cannot touch them. The EX model, wage is a constant, security budget is a constant, so whatever remains, we must do a better job. So I do not want to say I'm blaming anybody. I'm part of this team, and that's the next level of analysis we have to go for. I thank you very much.
That's really interesting, and Michael, you've heard it from him. And I agree with him that we need to then focus on how we're spending this money. But we'll just get there shortly. I thought that we could weigh in on debt. Now that we have talked about how Mr. Chailab and the Minister of Finance distributed money, part of which, by the way, there is 2 audit reports that have been done by the Auditor General and by the Minister of Finance into the COVID-19 expenditure. I don't know why Mr. Chailab hasn't released it to the people, but I know that it's there, and we are trying. It's still classified, but
no, we're validating it.
You're validating. You're validating it. We'll get to it shortly. But let's look at where this money really is going to come from, and perhaps once we've understood where it's coming from, then it can help us really get serious with how we can actually spend it. And this is the last round of questions for us. Let me break it down for our viewers. According to the Ministry of Finance, this is how the money is going to be got. And so the budget is 44.7 trillion. Domestic revenue amounts to 22 trillion, of which 20 trillion will be tax revenue. Now, URA, its target has increased from 18 to 20 trillion. 20.8 to be exact. And the 1.5 trillion will be non-tax revenue. Domestic borrowing for this financial year, 2021-2022, is going to be at 2.9 trillion. So, as we're trying to recover from the money that the Chailab got from the domestic market, he's going back to the same domestic market to get an estimated 2.9 trillion. Then we are looking at the petroleum fund resources that amount to about 200 billion. Then we have budget support accounts for about 3.5 trillion. External financing for projects amounts to 6.8 trillion, of which 5.5 trillion is from loans. And that means we're going to the international markets like the IMF, the World Bank, the African Development Bank to get money. And so we're looking at an estimated 5.5 trillion shillings. And of course the 1.3 trillion will be from grants. And money from local government goes to about 212 billion. And then domestic debt refinancing will amount to 8.5 trillion. Whoa, that's interesting. And so I would ask Michael to weigh in, but why should I first ask Michael to weigh in? Let me first ask Chailab, because you are the one who really broke down these things. You're the Secretary to the Treasury. So we're planning, but we don't see where to get money. We have to go back to the domestic market. Do you think the resource mobilization envelope for this financial year is feasible, in your view? Then I can bring in Michael and Julius to weigh in.
Thank you. The domestic resource mobilization strategy is consistent with the financing requirements for the NDP3 programs for the second year running, but for start of the program approach to budgeting. 8.5 trillion, when it's up from down there, is actually a rescheduling of the payments, which fall due by issuing a new debt. So it doesn't come as part of what we actually spend on the actual expenditure side. It's a reorganization of debt such that whatever matures, I issue a fresh debt and roll over. The only thing which comes up for expenditure is the interest rate at which I'm rolling over. And of course, that's what Dr. Ting said. It's also growing, and we all know it's growing. So it is not a financing coming to pay for the infrastructure projects or what. It's coming to replace a financing, borrowing coming to replace the borrowed money which falls due, but it's not going to be settled at a particular time. If our revenue improves, as we aim for expansion of the economy, we should start actually paying off. When the money becomes due, we pay off instead of rolling over, so that we mitigate the growth of the 8.5. But it's consistent with our debt strategy. Now, going to the resource mobilization for next financial year, right from the revenue side, we are mindful of the recovery of the economy. And no sooner had the budget been read, or was it read at a time when a mini action has already been taken again on the lockdown, then it will have possibly an impact on this 20.7 from URA. So that's a first lockdown effect that you need to watch out extremely carefully as you assess us on our ability to forecast and also collect money from the domestic market in order to finance our own expenditures. The rest of the expenditure, 2.9 trillion actually, is we are falling back to a position pre-COVID situation of domestic borrowing. And this is about close to 1% of the, close to 1% of the GDP, the 2.9 trillion that we are borrowing from the domestic market. We want to maintain it around that level. It's consistent with our long-term projection of the level of domestic borrowing. And you say domestic borrowing is not bad per se. It's not bad.
Because sure it's not bad.
It's not bad. Domestic borrowing is not bad. And I think Dr. Ting will come and support that, because if you assume a situation where...
I'm not sure if he's going to support you on that.
Let me finish my point. Domestic borrowing is not bad because it's part of the ecosystem, the financial system in the country, that private sector alone may not be able to support the financial sector stability. But this domestic borrowing is equally good in order to balance out other macroeconomic parameters with respect to the financial sector stability. So 2.9 is well calculated and assessed to be a reasonable level. In fact, this was a level we were pre-COVID. But when COVID came, that's when we jumped to 6 point something this financial year. But otherwise, pre-COVID, if you check in the books, you find that we have gone back that level of domestic borrowing, because we are mindful of the need not to impair the private sector in this borrowing. So the architecture of the budget and its financing are consistent with our medium-term targets for growth and also debt sustainability. All this financing for next financial year will lead to a debt GDP ratio of 51.9. And the minister mentioned it, it's not a surprise to you. And we have calculated, it's 51.9. It has reached the 50% mark, but according to, if you compare ourselves with regional economies, we are much, much better compared to the regional economies. Some of them are 70% on net present value. These are nominal value. 51.19% is nominal. Other countries, or even on net present value, discounted cash flows of debt, they are much higher than 51.9%. So we think our debt position is quite consistent with our growth target and also consistent with the level of economic performance that we are targeting.
Let me bring in Julius, because he's the expert on debt really on this issue. Julius, listening to Mr. Chailab, he's telling us there's a lion coming But don't worry, it's not going to eat you up. You know, I got it all together. But it's coming, it's approaching. It has increased from 49.8 and he's saying it's coming closer at 51, but don't get worried. We're still in a very comfortable zone. Julius, do we need to get worried because of this debt?
You see, previously I had said that the 50% threshold for me was not a very big issue. Why? Because the levels in terms of mobilizing resources that we need and the terms of appetite to spend that we had were really, there was a very big gap. But also considering that with COVID period, there are those expenses you have to make to survive. And I think that was the first thing. So getting 51.9%, I'm not surprised. And if we go in another third, fourth lockdown, it might even go even further than that. But what is my biggest problem, Solomon? I think my biggest problem is not because of the debt rising, but the way we utilize it is where I want us to put more efforts. Is that even if we hit 100% debt to GDP, what are we actually utilizing that money for? And I think Michael asked that and said, where is the domestic, where are we putting the domestic loans we are getting, where is it going? Where are we putting it? And for me is, number one is we need to address issues to deal with our absorption capacity, that the money we borrow, we have the capacity to absorb it. That's number one, because when the Auditor General tells you that some projects are actually not absorbing all the money, then you have a problem. That means that he is paying for loans that that have not been dispersed. So we need to deal with that. The second thing that we need to do is
big issue. That's a big issue. There is, and I looked at the report that CSBAG released too on that issue. We are paying interest on money that we have not even absorbed.
I mean, and that's not our figure. It's the Auditor General's figure on what we are paying on the money we have not dispersed, and the Secretary Treasurer definitely knows about that. And why is it so? Because we have some challenges here in this country. First is you want to start a road and you have no right of way. Because you thought actually you can pay off people and you put a road, but somebody has a shrine or is burial ground, you know, a cemetery there. And even if you give them $1 trillion, they don't care. They just want their ancestors to remain in peace. Those are the kind of things that actually have delayed most of our projects. So you go to project redesigning again and all others. So I think it is very important that before we get this money, we are prepared to move on. Let me deal with on the domestic debt. I think domestic debt, the domestic borrowing, for me is the commercial banks definitely will not give us money, the ordinary people around, because they know there is somebody who has the huge appetite for it and they can pay back. So you keep the money, even if you keep it half of the year, because you know at the end of the year he's coming to pick that particular money. So in terms of the speculation, you know that the government is going to come and borrow money from you. So instead of borrowing to Julius and you start running around him all the time to pay back, you know there is a treasure that is not going anywhere. They're able to pay back. So if we could project and encourage government to look for external financing, which is concessional, because they have the capacity to negotiate than me and you. We cannot negotiate with the Exim Bank. We can't negotiate with the Kuwait Fund. You can't negotiate with the African Development Bank. No, but the government can because they have the capacity. And try as much as possible to leave the domestic market for private sector. And I think that could slightly reduce on the cost of debt. So for me, really is debt, the debt issue is on how we are utilizing it.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Michael, weigh in on this.
Thank you so much, Solomon. I think this is a hot potato. I agree with the PSST that, and also with Julius, that looking at the debt GDP number for 21-22 at 51.9, I think there's a business case for it. I think we don't argue against that. This is moving from nearly 50% in 2021 stroke 2020 stroke 21. So there's a business case for that. Now the assumption, of course, if you look at it, Solomon, is that in the medium term, this trajectory of debt GDP is going to come down, all right, to below 50%. So if that is the case, then it makes sense. But so where's my caveat on this, Solomon? My caveat on this is the assumptions that have been underpinned on this debt GDP coming down to 50%. It is assuming that that growth in GDP is going to take place, all right? And also it assumes that we are going to mobilize sufficient revenues to finance the repayment of this debt, and that we shall have sufficient forex to repay the external debt. So there are three key indicators that we're looking at. Debt GDP, what's going to happen to your GDP going forward? And what's going to happen to your revenues? Already, currently, for every 1 shilling that we're collecting in tax revenue, 30 cents is going for the servicing of debt. Can you imagine the impact of that on health and education and what have you? Could have been substantial. Debt servicing is consuming every 25 cents from every $1 that we're getting. So these are the assumptions. So there are risks around that scenario. The upside risks include the fact that, one, I don't think to what extent all these oil and gas, these oil agreements that were concluded recently, right? And the fact that it's leading to the final investment decision, if that takes place, then you are going to have probably much higher GDP growth. So that is the upside risk, right? That it could actually be better than we think. And then, of course, this animal called COVID-19, if the treatment, if the vaccines, come all on board, everybody gets immunized, the 4.8 million, we are back, we open education, schools are open, tourism is open. Of course, that one we're in a comfortable position. So I have no problem with the 51.9. But at the same time, Solomon, there are downside risks. And the downside risks here are, one, the tightening of the financial conditions in advanced countries. Right now, we are having significant offshore players in our domestic securities market because interest rates in the advanced countries are very low. So you find every participation, every treasury bond auction here, you find banks looking for $20 million to sell, all right, for participants to, for foreign participants to participate in the market. And that's having an impact on the exchange rate. Some of you are asking, why is the rate so strong these days, right? We are seeing lots of offshore players in the market, all right? So you find that the rate as of yesterday was 3,620, all right? So all these other flows, and particularly offshore, are contributing to this. Now the challenge is inflation is beginning to increase in advanced economies. So depending on what the central banks do as a policy response, should they raise the interest rates? And then these guys who are here say, wait a minute, where should I invest my money? Uganda or in the US? Then they might reconsider and then say, okay, fine, I'm going to move back. So that's going to be an impact on that. So that will cause a problem, and you could have a depreciation, and that depreciation could have an impact on the shilling value of the debt. That's one. Two, this vaccine, the treatment we're talking about, already we are, at the time we were drawing this budget, we were not thinking of second lockdown. Now, the second lockdown has come. I don't know the intensity and the duration of it, what happens to it. And then, of course, you look at the other financing sides also. Your domestic revenues are increasing from 18 trillion to nearly 20 trillion. What is the impact of all these things playing now on the 1.8 trillion? So those are the downside risks. Now, if such a shock happens, right, then you don't have the capacity to respond to it. So your debt might deteriorate going forward. And also right now, we are exhausting the room, what I call a buffer, all right, in case there are further shocks. God forbid you get an earthquake today, and then you are supposed to address the needs of those guys. I'm not sure where Mr. Chailab is going to get the money from because he has exhausted all the buffers, all right? So Our capacity now to address any emerging emergencies, for that matter, if I may call it emergencies, is getting very constrained. So we need to bring back this debt GDP down as quickly as possible so that we're in a position to address any unforeseen shocks. So that's what I would like to say about that.
Thank you. Thank you, Michael. Let's have a parting shot and then we take a break. Let me start with Dr. Joseph. What's your parting shot as we close this conversation around the budget? Dr. Joseph Muvawala.
My parting shot is that as a team of people who are doing economic management in this country, we are doing, and therefore, I'm not so much worried about the debt GDP ratio. We had to have some level of debt, given the condition we're in. We had to borrow, we had to spend. We now have to go back internally because the devil is in the detail. The devil is so much in the detail. The issue of utilization of our debt is critical, and Patrick knows it. We have some spending units for whom we are canceling loans. 1, 2, 3 loans are canceled in a spending unit, but the managers of that spending unit are still the same. For me, that's why I have a problem. If I am in charge of NPA, I'm a spending unit to deliver something, and I am not doing it well. For God's sake, why is my contract still running? I should go home. Because we are going to continue borrowing, but we must utilize those resources better. And the spending unit now, that is where we need to concentrate. The entire discussion today has been on the strategic issues. I would like us to have another discussion on the detail in the spending units. That's where we're going to get it right, because we're not going to get more money quickly. We will not have the discretion. We're not going to change COVID right now. We must ensure that whatever resources we get, we spend it well. There must be a disincentive for failure to spend well in this economy. With regard to informal sector, you don't have to force them to formalize. But the moment you give them an incentive, they will formalize. I am a maize miller myself, but why should I formalize? Even when your credit does not help me, why should I formalize, for God's sake? Your power is too expensive for me. Give me an incentive. Tomorrow I will formalize by evening. Thank you very much.
What a way to... I like what you're saying, Joseph. I am really, really in love with what you're saying. Ochaila was saying, how do they formalize? But they have to, but you have to give them an incentive. Interesting views. Our time is fast spent, so I'll give you 1 minute, all of you, to give me your parting shots, and then we take a break. I'll start with Ochaila.
Thank you. A parting break certainly is that 3 things. 1, we must improve absorption capacity of the loans which are borrowed. And in that respect, I've directed some of my staff to do a thorough analysis between now and September. And a report out of that will have specific recommendations on what to do, including sanctioning the accounting officers where resources are not absorbed. Because lack of absorption is a danger in 2 ways. 1, it occupies the fiscal space that would otherwise use for getting resources for other sectors. 2, and most importantly, it increases our cost of the borrowed funds by not contributing to the economy for which the resources were borrowed in the first instance. And 3, and most importantly, is certainly an inefficient mechanism for allocation of resources. On account of that, I think by September, you will see the kind of recommendations that are going to come, and I'll put it forward to the appointing authorities of those guys and see what they can do or cannot do with them. 2, I agree on the issue of refocusing at the lower level, the efficiency of the budget. That one is also something that we need to look at as we prepare for the budget of next financial year. In a budgeting cycle, the other financial year budget is going to start being prepared around about September. So no sooner that this one starts, that the other one starts. So it's a serious matter. Number three, the borrowing, I think, is okay, but we must pay attention to the areas for which we borrow resources for, and the curve that we are, assumptions underlying the trend of the debt GDP ratio. We need to look at them very seriously, looking at the downside and the upside side part of it. For example, some of us traveled up country most of the time. You can see there is a dry spell. And I could see all along, right from Soroti up to Kampala, maize is starting to wither. So I don't know whether the factory for Muvawala will have maize to hull next season. That's a real danger. That's a real threat. Should that drought hit us, we need to kneel down and pray. And COVID is with us. And the measures to mitigate it must be implemented. Then we have another big problem, which threatens our downward trajectory of debt GDP going forward. I'm not saying anything now, but I'm just saying the constraints and assumptions underlying the trajectory, we pray stay on course, but if there are new areas, such as I've seen, the drought is a very serious matter that we need to pay attention to. Thank you.
Thank you. And Ochaila mentioned to me earlier in a couple of months back, he said the reason why he was able to sustain and help the economy recover was because people had food. Yes. And I think I agree with you that people had food. So I think you...
And we bought food for the relief people.
And we did not import, so it means we had food.
Income, demand to them.
Great. Julius, you're parting short on this. You have a minute.
Yes, please. Two. One is for me is to, we've been taking this, you know, when we say macroeconomic stability, it's like we take it for granted. You know, having a stable inflation, you know, stable exchange rate, your financial sector is working. Solomon, if these things were not working well, we would not be having an economy to talk about for. And therefore, to those who were behind it, really, I think for me, we are very grateful for that, especially the Bank of Uganda, Ministry of Finance for that. Lastly, is this partnership we are on today, is that to have a civil society, you know, CRT, CS BAG, Ministry of Finance, URBOU, to talk about the things that affect us as a country. I think these platforms are very important. And to the citizens who are listening, some of these things, that we all have a role to play to ensure that we recover as an economy, we also benefit from it. So I'm looking forward for more engagements, but also suggestions on how, and not only the person's income in the pocket can increase so that we can all live better. Thank you.
Thank you. Michael, you have the final say at this, your punching thought.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'll be brief. Yes, I agree with Julius. Let's not take macroeconomic stability for granted. The thing is very important for the discussion we have. Without macroeconomic stability, we wouldn't be discussing this. That's one thing. And then two, back to the topic of this, growth, employment, and wealth creation. We need to focus on micro, small, medium enterprises. How do we address this? These guys are employing a lot of people. Chances for job creation are in there. So how do we work with the micro support center, UDB, you know, all these kinds of, including the SEF? Solomon, I've been begging Ochaila to give me more money for SEF. Because SEF, if you look at the NPA of NCF, is under 2%. And we're lending money to guys in the rural areas. You know, you give me about 10 billion, only 10 billion more. That thing could translate the lives of so many people. And then secondly, the issue of digitizing for financial inclusion, all right? Because we wouldn't be looking for money in the budget if these guys were financially included. They had access to financing. So we need to pursue the digitization agenda, all right? So that we have more e-payments come on board. We have more of these micro, small, medium enterprises also accessing financial services so that they're included. Then we can see how to build on credit investment on that. And then finally, building resilience in both financial and non-financial institutions to withstand all the shock that we're talking about. Because tomorrow we are going to have another shock. So what is the capacity of our household and institutions to withhold another shock? And then finally, domestic arrears. If we could clear domestic arrears, we could also solve problems in the banking sector. because to date, there are a number of NPS in the banking sector which are linked to non-payments by government to the private sector. So I know Mr. Chailab gave some little money in the budget, but if we're talking about restarting growth, another increase in domestic arrears would go a long way to restart growth. And then, of course, debt, mindful of GDP. Can the GDP we are creating raise taxes, raise exports to finance debt service? Thank you so much.
Thanks, Michael. Maybe you can just switch off your mic
Oh,
briefly.
sorry.
Ochala, Michael has concluded in two things that for me are take home. One is that you need to pay domestic debt. Why aren't you paying people? Why aren't you? Service providers are crying. There's no liquid money. You did well during the COVID-19. Pay people. Why don't you pay them? Pay people. Pay. You took their services. Pay for them.
I budgeted for another 400 billion next financial year. And that's what I have verified. Because also the payments, some of them are claims. And claims need to be what? Verified. So until I verify, I can't pay. But I verified 400 billion. I'm happy to announce I'll pay 400 billion next quarter, beginning next month.
Okay. And also, you give Michael money in the agriculture credit facility. Yes. Michael, how much is Ochala giving you? Switch on your mic, Mike.
For 2020/21, he gave me about 50 billion. But if you look at the number of applications seated in Bank of Uganda, because of the high success of this thing, the number of applications is so huge. I think we have nearly $500 billion demand. And this thing, Solomon, just beyond record, the performance of this thing is extraordinary. It is a concept that has been proven, it has been established that it can work. So our aim is to grow that thing, and when it's mature enough, move it out of Bank of Uganda, just like we have done for the Deposit Protection Fund, the Institute of Bankers. So we're nurturing, and then with the view of growing it out. So Mr. Chailab, if you could give me more money, I would really hasten that progress.
Thank you.
Discussions go on.
Ochala has had. Hopefully they can add you some money. Michael Atingiego, Deputy Governor, Bank of Uganda, thank you very much for sharing your thoughts. Let's give him some love, guys. Julius Mukunda, Executive Director, CS Bank, thank you. Let's give him some love. My friend Ochala, Patrick, PS at the Ministry of Finance, let's give him some love, guys. Thank you very much, Mr. Joseph Muvawala, Doctor. Thank you very much, Executive Director for the National Planning Authority. Thank you. We love you. Thank you very much for your input and for being independent. We loved your submissions and analysis. And especially thank you to all of you who are watching us live from different television stations, including Smart 24, Salt TV, NBS, NTV, BBS, URA TV. Let's take a break. When we return, the private sector speaks back. I'm Solomon Serwanja. I'll see you shortly. Good morning.
The day the world stopped was the day we found where to go. From now on, we are not going to leave anything on our plates, because we've learned to savor the moments that were always there, and they never tasted this good.
Introducing Rolex Express on Glovo. Get Nyanyambisi from 2,000 Uganda shillings and Rolex with homemade meals from as little as 7,000 Uganda shillings.
Little money, 100 billion. I tell you, when I go to UDB, I'd ask for 3, 4, 5 billion. Because that's $1 million, $1.5 million.
And so then the suggestion you are saying is that, can we review the tax policy? Conclude on that. I think I loved it. Say it again.
That is the most critical thing, that we should review the tax policy to make the small and medium industries more profitable, and therefore investors can invest at that level and grow. I can give you one example. Government, one of its efforts to support local manufacturing came up with import substitution scheme. They said, oh, we are in a COVID pandemic, we should support import substitution. And in so doing, let's produce our own sanitizers, let's produce on this. But you know how they did it? They raised import duty on each and everything to 35%, including intermediate raw materials. And who pays? The end user pays. Who fails to import? The medium and scale industries. So this is what we are saying, that our policies should be focused and targeted to specific units, and also should support the small and medium industries.
Okay, thank you very much. Let me bring you Daniel here. Daniel, this budget looks all rosy for people into agro-processing, and I know that Raboni does a lot of agro-processing, and so, you know, a significant chunk is coming to you. Are you excited as agro-processors, and what is the ease of, you know, getting access to this cheap credit to support you so that you can pay taxes in return? Are you excited about this budget?
Thanks, Solomon. I don't know what you say a significant portion, what the definition of significant portion means.
Agro-processing, sir. Everyone has been saying they're putting money.
I'll just give you some of the figures. I read this budget and slept over it. And then asked myself a question. 30 million Ugandans are depending on agriculture, including 11 million direct smallholder farmers. And you allocate 1.67 trillion out of the almost 45 trillion budget to support agro-industrialization. That's 3.7%. In simple terms, it means you are saying 68% of the population fight for 3.7% of the budget. That's what it means. Now, for us who are in agro-industrialization, I look through the things that they would like to do. They look extremely very rosy on paper. But as they always say, the devil is always in the detail. I looked at what they try to do. The total warehousing space, which is a critical thing for us in the industrial space, is 46,500 metric tons of warehousing space that they would like to put up in the different parts of the country. Now, that can only cover 0.4% of the farming community. Now, how rosy a picture is that for somebody who is trying to develop the agro-industrial space? We had a big shock here for us who are in the maize industry. The maize that was going does not die at the border. It doesn't die on the trucks. It dies right at the farmer level, where the farmer picks the maize, and chicken are sleeping in that maize. The goats are sleeping in that maize. I was in Kiriandongo talking to some smallholder farmers the other day. Farmers do not have simple things like tarpaulins. Just a simple tarpaulin. What do? They'll put that maize right on the ground. But what does the government do? Oh, we shall put food safety systems at the borders. Do you want to tell me that the maize would have germinated again by the time it reaches the border and changed its quality? Why don't you invest some of these funds right at the farmer level here and get them to do basic post-harvest handling? I'll share with you some of the figures. We are trying to get these farmers to earn money. For us, we want to get grain from them and process it and then sell it onto the other market. But there's a big problem in aggregation. You send a truck to move around, and it will typically take a week just getting 30 metric tons. Why? Somebody has 1 bag, another one has 2 bags, another one has 3 bags. And then the metric tons that you are putting up can only cover 0.4%. If you multiply that by 11 million, it will take us 236 years just to cover 11 million farmers. And that is on the assumption that no more additional farmers are put onto the market. There's no additional population of farmers. So where does the resource allocation go? Do you actually mean what you say by putting the funds to help this agro-industrial space? It's a bit difficult. Now, coming to us who are in the agro-industrial space, I liked what Dr. Atingego mentioned, that is begging for money to put in the SCF. I've been in the line, in the queue for 3 years for the SCF fund, and I simply can't access it. What do? I go into the commercial space where somebody is going to give me money at a very exorbitant rate to put up a warehouse. A good warehouse of 3,000 metric tons will take me $325,000. Yes, EAGC standard warehouse, $325,000. Now, for an SME, where do you get that kind of money? The local financing that is available, somebody is giving you 3 months to pay back the money. The moment you touch the money, the next month they want their interest. Now, what do? I'll operate at that very, very small level. There is nothing that I can be able to do to trigger additional investment. Why? The financing that I can get is so short-term and so costly that I can only operate at a very, very small space. If the SCF is available there, for me to recoup that $325,000, it will take me 10 years. But you are giving me money which you want me to start paying next month. Are you trying to grow me, or are you trying to suffocate me? Those are the questions that we should be asking in this case.
Wow. 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 My brother, you brought it home. What do we do? What do you advise the government to do moving forward to support you?
The solutions for these things are not complex. The question is, are you willing? Are you actually willing? Let me go. The government can say we don't have enough resource envelope to help you. But there are other fiscal incentives it can put in place. If you went to the commercial bank and told them, if you lend somebody in this, depending on what you want to promote, and I see here the theme of the budget is industrialization for inclusive growth, and I put an underlying word, inclusive. Inclusive means you are trying to bring everybody into the space. Now, simple things like giving them an incentive. If you lend to somebody who is in this processing field, we shall give you a tax incentive of this amount of money. The banks will sit down and do their calculations and say, where do I benefit from? Do I benefit by lending to government? Do I benefit by lending to companies that are doing this space? Then they'll take a decision. You don't have to have the money, but you have the power through the fiscal incentives that you can give them, and they'll respond. Now, if they have no incentive, they'll sit on their chairs and wait for you 6 months when you are broke to come and borrow their money, and they'll lend it to you. That is one. I go back to the issue of productivity. We have the Semioga Fund. You are sending 30 million shillings to the parishes. To do what exactly? Have you asked yourself that simple question? To do what exactly? You have these smallholder farmers. You send 30 million. Somebody's go and buy 2 fish and put in a stall because he has an idea they want to borrow some money from Emioga. That won't grow. There are things that they can do. I did some simple mathematics, and I can advise government if they approach me. I can tell them some of these figures.
In 15 seconds, sir.
A farmer who is using recycled seed and rents land makes a loss of 35,250 shillings per acre. They don't earn money. That's why you'll find the leaders going to the villages and people are begging for just 1,000 shillings. Why? Simply they're not earning money. Okay. These things are known. Why don't you help this person to get improved seed? That directly feeds into a buyer who is ready to buy. That person, by using improved seed, that money changes to 133,000 shillings. By using just improved seed. And this is an investment of around 100,000 shillings extra.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow, interesting. Guys, I'm so sorry. Time is fast spent. I would love to have heard from you. I'll give each of you a minute to tell us a way forward, and then people are going for news. It's 1 o'clock, and we have cheated some time for them. Yeah. Way forward, Mr. Evarosto in a minute, and then Deosa, way forward.
Yeah, as I mentioned, because you were mentioning something about Myoga, and we computed those who received Myoga, because usually they give 30 million to about how many people, but usually we computed, and each one is entitled to about 400,000 shillings, and I think this one can help business to as a stimulus package.
I think, like you had said earlier, that it's given to small.
Yes, to the micro. But I think we also need something which can come up and help the business community. And there should be a program, because much as we cherish the manufacturers, the distributors, we need them in the chain so that they can also survive. Okay. So the manufacturers, he does the manufacturing, like East African Roofing. Then he needs me as a distributor so that his goods can reach the market. Okay. So we need to finance or to make provisions for the entire value chain.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Kayondo. Dale, your final say on this in a minute, sir.
Yeah, quick one. Government has been forthright in putting in place systems and interventions to help the economy, to help the small and medium. But what has failed is the continuous monitoring and evaluation and the timely moderation of the programs to match the time. We request that the government now gets back to do the continuous monitoring and evaluation and timely interventions. That will help a lot of things you are hearing, because they put in place policies and it takes a whole year, cycle of a year to get back and to change the law or to do something. I think that's my advice.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you very much, gentlemen. Mr. Evarosto Kayondo, Chairman Kasita, thank you. Let's give him some love, guys. Mr. Kaimbadeo, thank you very much, the Deputy Chairperson for Uganda Manufacturers Association, and Daniel Jolova, co-founder and managing director of Raboni Group. Thank you very much. My goodness, I would really have loved to have more of these conversations, because you're the ones on ground. So I'll see if we can have you guys tomorrow once again. But thank you very much. Guys, let's give them some love. All right, a special thank you to everyone who has been watching. Be sure to catch us tomorrow, same time, same place. A special thank you to Salt TV, Smart 24, NBS, NTV Uganda, BBS, and URA TV. Thank you very much to our sponsors, the Ministry of Finance, Accord, URA, Siatini, CS Bag, and Odi. And thank me for moderating this. All right, love you guys. See you. Coming up is news at different stations. Stay on your favorite television station, wherever you're watching. Thank you. My name is Solomon Seranja. Good afternoon.
Thank you very much, Solomon, for guiding us through. Maybe before our panelists leave, we have a small token of appreciation to each of our panelists. Mr. Moses Kagwa, I would like to ask you to help us hand over these small tokens of appreciation to our panelists and the moderator in appreciation of the moderator. We need to thank him for guiding this discussion. We'll start with Mr. Joloba from the SME fraternity, the agro-processing. We could take the photos here. Here, right here.
Here, down or up?
Up is best, yes. For the discussion on behalf of the, yes. Thank you very much. Thank you.
The Uganda Revenue Authority, Accord, Siatini, CS-BAG, OD, thank you guys for organizing this event and for making it possible. And we want to say a special thank you to all the technical team behind this production. We are live on NBS, we are live on NTV, Salt TV, Smart 24, BBS, and URA TV. Thank you for joining us from wherever you are. We're also live on different radio stations across the country, and your voice matters, so be part of the conversation. Go on Twitter or Facebook, tag me in, I'll be able to sample your views and comments shortly. So listen, we are going into the final session of it. We'll take about 30 minutes on this, and then tomorrow we'll be coming back with more, so be sure to join us tomorrow same time for the program. We want now to speak to the private sector. We had earlier on spoken to government, but are these things really viable? The investment in the private sector, which by the way government is eyeing to to stabilize the economy and push it forward through the stormy waves of the COVID-19 pandemic. So I thought that we could talk to the private sector. And let me introduce my panelists this afternoon. We have Mr. Everesto Kayondo, who is the chairman, CASITA. Mr. Kayondo, it's always an honor sitting right next to you. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon for this discussion. Let me also introduce Mr. Kayemba Deo, who is the deputy chairman for the Uganda Manufacturers Association. Mr. Kayemba, thank you very much for joining us this afternoon. We are privileged to have you. Let me also welcome Daniel Joloba, who is the managing director and co-founder for Roboni Group. Thank you so much for joining us, Mr. Joloba, this afternoon. All right, I'll ask if you're speaking, you can please put on your microphone and then you can speak. So, listen, you have heard it from the people who do the planning, who do the allocations, and who do the implementations, and who manage the fiscal and monetary policies. They were here. We want to take the conversation to the businessmen, the people in the businessmen. And I want to start with you, Mr. Kayondo. At the peak of the COVID-19 pandemic, the people you represent, the traders downtown, I'm speaking about the people who own shops, the retailers, the people in Chiembe right now, whose businesses were closed for quite a while and struggled. And even when we're going through the 42-day, many of them are still struggling because people are not buying anymore, who used to buy from Gulu, Arua. Certainly their businesses were struggling. Do you feel that government, and indeed this budget, is going to help the people you represent? Mr. Kayondo.
Thank you very much. Indeed, it is a very big challenge. Everyone, because COVID came as a bombshell. We didn't expect it to be this big. It started when we thought maybe it was short-lived. And at first we thought it could be just in China, and that is it. Although China is a very big trade partner with Uganda, and you should appreciate that most of our businessmen source their merchandise from China. But before we could know it, then it spread even to other countries, and movement was restricted, and finally we had the lockdown. So the first challenge which we got when we got the lockdown was the rent. People continued accruing rent to the tenants and the businessmen, but this is when they were not working. Besides, even banks continued accruing interest during the lockdown period. And you can be aware that what happened was the loan restructuring, and they were allowed to pay, but pay later as the interest was also being accrued. Now, this became a very big problem because we thought there could be a round table talk between government, which had passed the resolutions of lockdown, then the landlords who are saying they were also suffering because banks continued accruing interest on their loans, and the banks themselves. Because seriously, people, up to now, it is a very big impact because people had eaten up their capital, and at the end of the day, when we opened, you could see people thinking about closing business and leaving town. As we talk now, the occupancy level has dropped of arcades. You will see most of these arcades are now at about 50% occupancy. And this is something which is very much worrying, and you can imagine where we are heading. Especially now we are not talking about this second lockdown. We are talking about what happened and its impact in the previous instance. So this budget, definitely, even before it happened, we had asked the government to make a very humble request and intervention, and they make sure that at least they could make a declaration that banks, the landlords should not accrue interest during the time when people were not working. But government was very silent about it, and they never rescued the traders. The only advantage we have got, because previously, because people were scrambling for rentable space, and they could pay what they call goodwill. Now, goodwill can't happen because if space is already there, so people are no longer paying goodwill. You can go anywhere, anytime, and get space without going through goodwill thing. But at the same time, so even at that time when we wanted the government rescue, they never came to our rescue, and we don't expect much even during this budget allocations, because they are not allocating anything. And talk about the stimulus package. The stimulus package, in fact, even in the morning I heard of the allocation about the stimulus package. Nothing came to our members because the money which was allocated through UDB was explicit when we met them. They said for us, we work with manufacturers and we finance agriculturists, and during this COVID, we also financed maybe the tourism sector. And, but when we told them, please, how about the trading section? They said, no, they don't finance trading sector. They only finance the other two. But even when you wanted the stimulus package, you had to go through a loan appraisal process. And if you are going to go through a loan appraisal process, you apply for a loan, they assess. If you don't qualify for a loan, then the stimulus package is never accessed. Meaning that, and imagine thinking of somebody taking up a loan when you are no longer working, when your businesses are down, and this is when you will think of taking up a loan. Remember, people had already taken up loans to finance their businesses. Now the business is collapsing and you want to take up a more bigger loan when actually you are not working. It became a challenge, and this is where we didn't get it right.
I feel your pain, Mr. Kayondo, and I put this question to finance people, because ultimately URA comes for you, and I think they really come on handy to knock and ask if you've paid your taxes. Downtown in Chikubo, you know, the whole of the traders there, And Ochaila didn't have answers for me, because I was telling him, what are you doing for the traders themselves? You know, they have been locked down, you know, they don't, I don't know if you belong to the, even when it's SMEs, you know, the Uganda Development Bank did not have money for you. The Microfinance Support Center did not have money for you. I don't know if the Myoga was reaching you though. The Myoga money, you're laughing about it, why?
Myoga, I think, goes down in those down microfinance institutions, the small ones in the villages. Nobody from Kampala. I think the allocations can't be in Kampala or in business with businessmen. It is for Myoga is for the small timers, okay. The micro ones.
The micro ones. So you didn't have anywhere to go except to commercial banks?
Absolutely, yes.
Okay. So let's see how this budget is going to support you in a way with allocation of money. Ochaila Pia just told us today that they have allocated over 100 billion to the small and medium enterprises in the next budget. So let's see how that goes about that. I'll come back to you shortly. Deo, let me bring you in as the Uganda Manufacturers Association. Clearly, you've heard it from Everasto here, who is saying that the microfinance, the Uganda Development Bank was given this money, about 550 billion shillings, and it was supposed to help manufacturers like you during the COVID-19 pandemic. And again, Ochaila is telling us that they're going to more recapitalize the Uganda Development Bank as the Minister of Finance to extend capital to you, the private sector, for you to be able to start manufacturing and help the economy recover. Are you optimistic?
I wouldn't say I'm very optimistic. Let me get back to the COVID fund, which was put in place in the first place. This money was put in UDB. It did help us a bit. Some industries which were struggling managed to access some of this money. And the new industries that were coming on stream to support the COVID pandemic, like the sanitizer manufacturers, and were able to access this money. But as earlier said, this money is not a fund meant for a pandemic like COVID. You have to apply for this money like a normal loan. You have to find security. You have to go through the process. And the process of obtaining this money is not different from the usual commercial banks where we get money. And two, the cost, although a little lower than the commercial banks, it's still very high, in the range of 12 to 14%. So, as a manufacturer, we also have challenges of accessing, and the fund is very small. I think we need to redefine, when we say SMEs or industries, we need to redefine what SME or a medium-scale industry in an economy the size of Uganda is. When I go to UDB, I'm not going to ask for 100 million. I'm going to ask for 3 billion, 5 billion. So in a bank that has been given so little money, the impact is very small, and that this money goes to a few companies and it dries up. Government needs to focus on UDB, on UDC, and other long-term lending institutions to make the money available. I know in this budget they say they are putting, what do they say, 100 billion. That's still very little money for economy of our size. And two, this money is put in microfinance institutions. That supports, and I agree, it supports to the micro businesses, but it does not support the medium-sized industries. Medium-sized industries and large, they need sizable amount of money. So when you say you are going to support, I think there should be, I know the money is not enough, the basket is not enough, but there should be other ways of supporting the small and medium industries and the small and medium business through a tax policy, a good tax policy structure. And I've been here, my brother Moses Kagwa is here, the director of tax policy, and we have been arguing on this issue that the small and medium industries and businesses need to be supported through a good tax policy. They need to support it through a good competition law so that they can stand and compete against the FDIs who are getting tax rebates on arrival. This is the conversation we should be having here.
So, Mr. Kayumba, your suggestion, and just to get it right, you're raising very critical points, and I don't want us to lose them. The first one is you're saying they should pump more money into the Uganda Development Bank and the Microfinance Support Center to support people.
Yes.
But then you were the same person who was telling me that this money was actually very expensive and difficult to get.
Kaminga is brought to you by
Mirinda.